He's your brother? Lucien.
You never get a second chance to make a first impression, as the saying goes. It's evidently true for many things, and video games are no exception. Well, most of the time. With this true indie title, which I will cover in a moment, that initial meet and greet can be a somewhat confusing affair. This is a psychological exploration and puzzle game in the mould of The Vanishing of Ethan Carter or Everyone's Gone to the Rapture. Now this alone sets you up to expect a narrative-driven and slow-paced game. The start though is almost a descent into madness, with obvious screen glitches, sanity questions, with a juxtaposition of flow that has you thinking something is very wrong. But it's all by design. Now these moments could see some walk away from the game with a bad view, and that would be wrong and a mistake, as once you've passed the starter, the main course in this episodic adventure leaves a much stronger impression. Designed from the ground up, inspired by older science fiction tales, the team have created a very clear view of the future and embellished it with enough lore and reality to convince. The artistic direction has nods to 2001 at times, with bright clinical corridors, grand planetary views and holographic androids dotted around the station. Crafted from scratch in Unreal Engine 4 on PC and Xbox consoles, it highlights the versatility of the engine and the ease of use it can bring to smaller teams without big budgets and time. This is really a step back to the C64, ST and Amiga days, as the lion's share of the game has been made by just two friends in Bulgaria. A further video and article come nearer the next chapter's release, where I go into how they created this, what challenges they faced in dual PC and console development, and how Unreal Engine 4 helped them achieve these challenges, and the result, with a budget closer to a cheap getaway than a large-scale game development. Now time is of course largely the free part in this compared to other studios. All that said, results delivered are strong and have been led with an equally strong design aim. The first thing to consider is the sheer scale, depth of expertise and resources big budget games have. This is not to be linked with those or judged on that level. Instead, it is likely a small a team as you could get to make a game with the help of a separate publisher that provides much of the logistics, contacts and even developer kits to make console versions. Much like id started out as a bunch of guys making games using other companies' equipment, which I covered back in my id retro story, this is a similar affair of a game developer setting up on their own with their own development dream. The limitations are hidden well. Animation and rigging models is one, something that is a skill that's not so easily acquired, in conjunction with animation programming that needs to sit alongside this. As such, a first-person view works well to keep this to a minimum, and the modelled quality in motion is never given prolonged attention on screen, so it never becomes a jarring issue. Many characters are sitting or walking away from you, so you hardly have the option to stare. This intelligent design always works to your strengths and manages your weakness. A great example of this is the original Toy Story. It minimised human faces throughout. The variety of locations and detail contained is excellent. Assets, materials and lighting are all very good and fitting of an Unreal 4 game. Physically approximate lighting model gives a broad range of surface details and blemishes to convince, as does the lighting itself, with per pixel managed in sections alongside contrast as lights flicker on or off. Strong bloom, electronic glow and neon hues are dotted across this first chapter well. All are fully real-time and dynamic, which is a requirement for the game and the artistic drive. One of the biggest reasons though is time. You see, having a real-time lighting improves iteration on the artist, and no baking of the light maps or GI is needed. Instead, areas can be built, tested, tweaked very quickly, enabling lights to turn on, affecting surface details, shadows, etc. all realistically, and many light sources cast shadows, giving you multiple in scenes, and is why keeping shadows to a minimum is advised on PC unless you have a beefy GPU. It also aids realism, with the high gloss surface reflections and bounce are key components to the visual style. All versions support screen space reflections, screen space ambient occlusion. It's not a common thing on consoles. Certainly with the overhead of Unreal Engine 4 it runs well. The gorgeous use of particles and bokeh sampled confusion zone depth of field is another element to the visual quality. With its sampling from the depth buffer to shift focus from foreground or background, accompanied by those lovely shapes, it reminds me of Alien Isolation. It's not a bad thing. Now, the use of motion blur, chromatic aberration is subtle, and even on consoles you can adjust as required, but you always need some of that cracking per object motion blur in my opinion. Backing this up, even on the base Xbox, is the option to target performance or quality, which means resolution settings and then frame rate. Here you have an increased resolution, which the option is then to cap at 30 FPS, or you can uncap this, which then should have the resolution setting to performance. Now, this sets a dynamic scaling solution in conjunction with the temporal AA, running from a base 1280 by 720 right up to 1600 by 900. In addition, some of the effects are reduced, such as screen space reflection quality, lighting accuracy, which can happen on a per scene basis. Being able to talk directly with the team has helped here, as I've been granted access to some of the settings they use and how they manage them. It should come as no surprise then that memory management is vital on consoles, more so on the base Xbox model, which limits both footprint and bandwidth for each effect, buffer size or scene. With a deferred engine, reducing some elements enables them to use the SRAM for more G buffers, which the much faster scratch pad of RAM on die with the APU is reducing the store issue from the much slower DDR3 RAM, the unified RAM pool that the consoles use. Just highlighting one of the many juggling acts and specific changes developers have to make for consoles. In contrast, the large pools of system and VRAM on PC means that many sections of the game and rooms reside in memory, with my often talked about streaming problems being far more commonplace and required for console development due to that limitation, something I will cover in a more in-depth article in the future. The X is the refined version of this, sporting a dynamic 3840 by 2160 down to a lowest 1920 by 1080p output, alongside the same choice of performance or quality, which itself is improved more with that high resolution effects on SSR and AO, and even texture bitmap bias, enabling higher resolution versions further away from the camera. This sharper image and effects can be noticed off the bat, and using a dynamic resolution is still the best use of the hardware combined with the engine's excellent TAA, makes for an obvious and welcome boost over the base version and close to the PC's best.
Sorry guys, lights off.
This does push on from here with high resolution shadow maps, fixed resolutions and other subtle elements that again add and refine to a great looking independent title. Unsurprisingly, above 60 FPS frame rates are possible, which can be welcomed by those with a 120 or 144Hz monitor, and it even runs well on budget machines, as demonstrated here on my old, very ancient now, FX 8350 and GTX 750 Ti, still pushing them frames well. A few tweaks here sees 1080-60 achieved, but Ultra will introduce some judder and a 30 FPS rate, which can be easily solved with more powerful GPUs, as this is not a CPU limited title even on consoles. It uses multi-core well, threading the render, logic and other code, something that Unreal Engine brings to all developers. For such a small team, albeit having worked on some big Ubisoft titles such as Black Flag, and his partner Kowalski having worked for Sega, Nintendo and Ubisoft, these brothers in arms, hence the studio name Kyodai, a brother in Japanese, brings a great deal of expertise and thus having a faster understanding of what a game takes to create. The results are excellent. Obvious issues can occur, from texture streaming being a little too low for the relevant choice in the menu, and some stuttering and frame pacing issues when setting the consoles to 30 and even on PC, alongside the varied acting level, with some voices clearly being from the amateur variety. All this should and can be forgiven for such a low budget game that still manages to outshine many more expensive projects from asset quality, story and certainly artistic aims and lighting. The synth soundtrack in the game is also excellent. A couple of great soundtracks in there, very moody, very mystical, and I actually enjoyed playing certain sections. They really added to the atmosphere of the scene. I hope this is something they push more in the next chapters. This is a £6 or £9 game on PC or Xbox respectively, and despite some limitations on development kit access, still support the increased power of the X alongside allowing us, the player, to choose between graphical quality or performance. They are busy working on Chapter 2 and beyond, which will increase the action, the pacing, and delve more into just what is going on in Elea's mind and world. They plan to improve the memory management to better work on the consoles and Unreal Engine streaming and LOD systems. All this would be an impossible task for two developers to achieve only a few years ago. It's now possible due to the AAA quality engine that is available for free to empower developers. Visual scripting design, simple and efficient internal tools to enrich their games without the need to spend millions on developing their own bespoke engine. And this is nothing but a revolution. I'm looking forward to playing part 2 and seeing just what it all holds. And as always, I'm completely self-funded and independent, so if you can, share this video to support the team and obviously to share my work. Check out other videos on my channel and read more over on Rectify Gaming. I'll be back very soon with more content, but I'll catch you guys and girls on the next one.